assessment number 1, we have chosen to focus on case study number 2, getting girls to school in Mozambique. Our role as international social workers is working for the organisation Save the Children in Mozambique. As lead social workers working for Save the Children, our role is to provide program development advice in a post-war context. Our role is to provide program development advice by investigating why girls are not being sent to school and to design and strategise a response to this and make recommendations for the future. To do so, we must understand the context of Mozambique. Mozambique is a country located within Southeast Africa. Between 1977 and 1992, Mozambique experienced 2 intense civil wars. In 1994, more than 1.5 million Mozambican refugees sought asylum in neighbouring countries as a result of the war and subsequent drought. Many of these refugees returned to Mozambique, forming the largest repatriation witnessed in sub-Saharan Africa. Consequently, 94% of the girls who are currently enrolled in primary schools in Mozambique fail to reach higher or advance to higher level grades. Past domestic issues have plagued the Mozambican educational system. The education infrastructure fell apart during the 2-decade civil war. Even though in 1992 Mozambique reached peace and established a multiple-party democratic system, the African nation continues to be plagued by poor governance. Furthermore, the prevalence of poverty and AIDS has placed schoolgirls in an increasingly difficult position. Clean water, sanitation, facilities, desks and other school supplies are unavailable to many schools. Schools are responsible for health services and psycho-social assistance that normally would be provided by the children's families. Girls, along with orphans and the most impoverished children, form some of the most vulnerable groups in Mozambique. The risk of dropping out of school or skipping school altogether is incredibly high. In this program, we are to initiate and increase school enrolment and retention. The program consists of school construction, teacher training and community mobilisation to encourage parents to send their children, especially girls, to school. We will now turn our attention to focus on the definition of international social work in the context of working with the schoolgirls in Mozambique. However, before we do so, I think it would be important to focus on globalisation and to think about globalisation and its links with international social work, as the two have historically been closely aligned. In the 21st century, globalisation sets the context for present-day international social work. Globalisation has also seen the emergence of an inclusive worldwide culture, whereby we are all global citizens and share a responsibility to one another. However, globalisation has also had negative effects across the world. Globalisation has also seen the destruction of many indigenous cultures, the exploitation, discrimination, and vitally the loss of industry in many developing countries in the global south. Essentially, those who do not have economic, social or cultural capital are left to compete with those who do. The ramifications, both positive and negative, of globalisation mean that the roles of international social workers vary and are fluid depending on context and country. International social work can be seen as the practice of social work in a country other than the home country of the social worker. In this context, this country is Mozambique in Southeast Africa. Hugman et al. 2010 offer a great definition of international social work. They underscore, in essence, international social work refers to the practice, policy and exchanges concerning situations in which the social worker, the service user, or the nature and cause of the issue that brings these two actors together has in some way moved across borders between nations. This definition can mean different things in different contexts. It could mean, for example, working with refugees in our home country who have come from another country. Or it could mean, as it does for us, working on the ground directly with the girls in Mozambique in a country other than our home country. International social work also occurs in many different dimensions. For example, international social workers work in disaster relief, in healthcare settings, and most commonly providing material aid. International social workers also work for different organisations such as government, non-government, international non-government and faith-based agencies such as World Vision. In our context, in this scenario, we are working for Save the Children, who are a non-government agency providing material aid and program development for the schoolgirls in Mozambique. I also think it is important in the context of Mozambique and our work in Mozambique to understand that international social work has been linked closely with colonisation and later decolonisation, which is also closely aligned with the process of globalisation. Traditionally, international social work has been viewed as the global north, countries such as the United Kingdom, United States and Australia providing aid and support to impoverished countries in the global south, such as Mozambique. This in itself can be viewed as a form of colonisation and power inequality, as Western cultural norms are often still enforced onto vulnerable peoples and cultures in these countries. In the case of Mozambique, their civil wars came as a direct consequence of Portuguese colonisation and subsequent decolonisation in the late 1970s. Both civil wars can also be seen to be entwined with communist and Marxist ideologies in a political climate dominated by global Cold War politics. This context alone underscores that social workers are working in a globalised world where the decisions of their home countries can make direct impacts onto other countries that they are working in. Hence, international social work is and continues to be concerned with the broader process of globalisation, as well as the ramifications of globalisation and what this means for countries in the global south. Having looked at the definition of international social work and what this definition holds for us in the context of working with the schoolgirls in Mozambique, we now look at potential challenges and how we may attempt to face these challenges if they present themselves. Some of the potential challenges and barriers to getting girls to school in Mozambique include attitudes to gender roles, early marriage, chores at home, and care for HIV-infected parents. When their parents die, to care for siblings means that even if the brother in the family is older than the oldest girl will still become the caretaker of her siblings, while the older brother continues their schooling. A potential challenge for us would be reflecting on our own values, especially thinking about feminist approaches and the oppression the girls in Mozambique are experiencing within their home and society. International social workers have a guiding set of principles and values when working with different cultures worldwide. However, these values can often be confusing and cause moral discomfort, raising many ethical dilemmas. As Donaldson 1996, page 48 states, international social workers are sometimes left asking themselves, when is different just different and when is different wrong? This can create significant challenges for international social workers. In our situation, we may be left asking ourselves, is it wrong for the girls in Mozambique to care for their family and miss education, while the boys in their family continue theirs? Or is it part of their culture, and how do we challenge this? Also, how far do we go to challenge entrenched socio-cultural factors such as early marriages and gender roles? To impose our Western ideology would be to reinforce the type of coercion experienced and seen in both civil wars and colonisation. Our work has also revealed that this area in Mozambique suffers from a severe water shortage. In Mozambique, girls are spending hours each day gathering water for their families, having to walk long distances to line up and fill their containers. The demands of water gathering has kept many girls away from school. However, if we were to stop the girls from gathering water for their families would become increasingly more vulnerable. Much of Mozambique's population live in rural areas compounded by drought, making sourcing water key to survival. Moreover, the existing schools in Mozambique, where we are working, have no water facilities and also no latrines. A lack of latrines means that the students simply have to go outside and use the grass. Boys and girls use the same area of grass surrounding the school. As girls become older, they are not comfortable using the same toilet as the boys, so they drop out of school. Finally, another potential challenge in getting the girls to school in Mozambique is that because very few girls complete their high school education, there are very few female teachers in Mozambique. This means that many of the young girls in Mozambique are not finding female role models to encourage them to continue their schooling. Likewise, what little female teaching staff there are in Mozambique, very few are drawn to rural areas for the reasons outlined above.
As a social worker employed by Save the Children, there are a wide range of ways we can contribute to this project while navigating the challenges that were previously identified. Save the Children has remained a highly reputable charity organisation for many years. Their lack of religious affiliation or agenda and their readily available information on both their processes and programs provides confidence on how they operate as a charity and the work they set out to do in Mozambique. It will be vital for us as international social workers to understand the history of Mozambique, especially considering the influences of the Cold War politics on a 2-decade civil war. Additionally, understanding Portuguese colonisation and the subsequent colonisation will help us to understand that power and coercion have been dominant drivers of cultural assimilation, whereby much of Mozambican culture has been lost. Sayaka Funda, 2012, page 60. Mozambique has suffered great division as a result of colonisation, especially as their Portuguese colonisers sought to exploit the populace through notorious slave trade and later conflict due to the scramble for Africa. Sayaka Funda, 2012, page 60. Working in this project as social workers, we need to be able to respect the people, community, their culture and knowledge, even when it might differ from our own. We can utilise the AASW Code of Ethics 2010 to help guide our practice and values. AASW Code of Ethics highlights 3 primary values that social workers should adopt, being respect for persons, social justice, and professional integrity. AASW Code of Ethics 2010. Knowing the work we do in Mozambique might bring up ethical dilemmas and challenge our ideas on social norms and cultural practices. It is important to constantly reflect, connect, and debrief with trusted mentors and utilise the AASW's Code of Ethics to help guide our practice. The Code of Ethics 2010 highlights that social workers are responsible for ensuring that their practice is culturally competent, safe, and sensitive. And as social workers, we should recognise and acknowledge the diversity within and among cultures, taking into account individual, family, group, and community needs and differences. AASW 2010, page 17. We also need to be passionate when working with the community, to sit with, listen to, and connect with community members, especially students, past and present, community champions, teachers, etc. We can gain a true understanding of their issues and needs, and in an international context, communication, trust, and connection are essential. Trust must be established with the community, and this will be discussed further in a resiliency approach. Working collaboratively to get basic human rights met. This includes hygienic bathroom facilities, safe drinking and bathing water, and accessible healthcare and basic educational resources. We can start by building relationships with the community to develop in-house educational programs that can help shift community attitudes on the importance of using latrines. There are other towns in Mozambique where this model has already been adopted and has had successful outcomes, as a UNICEF 2017 report highlights. Sometimes a shift in people's awareness and habits take time, but once they see the benefits and less bouts of sickness for themselves and their family, like in other towns where similar projects have been implemented, locals then band together to dig holes and build structures around them to allow for privacy. Having safe and hygienic toileting options also provides better health outcomes, especially in rural communities where local healthcare facilities are usually non-existent or many hours of walking to attend. As social workers using models like the community organising approach, we can support a process that works towards the community taking control of projects like this, and it can also extend to the work we do to get basic access to water in rural townships. empowering the local community to lobby government and other organisations and agencies to get inoperative water bores repaired or new bores drilled will allow safe drinking water to be available locally. And this in itself can help girls to fulfil their right to education and reduce the burden on women and girls to walk hours to fetch water each day. If the bore can be community owned or even maintained by local people, it means potential employment for local members of the community, which supports ongoing sustainable opportunities that can benefit the region for many years to come. As social workers operating in this context, it is important that we continue to challenge injustices and inequity where possible, and support both the community and the most vulnerable people to have their basic human rights met. The AASW Code of Ethics 2010, page 13, outlines that social workers should be promoting justice and social fairness by acting to reduce barriers and expand choice and potential for all persons, with special regards to those who are disadvantaged, vulnerable, oppressed, or have exceptional needs. We should also be advocating for change to social systems and structures that preserve inequalities and injustice. And where culturally appropriate, we should be working with the community to support implementing fairer systems and better human rights outcomes for all community members. We can do this through models like the community organising approach. By using various social work intervention models such as community organising, EGG, behaviour change, assets and resiliency approaches, we can further support the work we do in Mozambique, and it is backed by research that aligns with the ethical standards and values of both the AASW Code of Ethics and the Save the Children Foundation. Finally, when working in an international context in countries like Mozambique that have entrenched social norms, sometimes the relationship formed with the client group is enough to drive change. Throughout our time working with the schoolgirls in Mozambique, we might not be able to change the community based on the challenges mentioned. However, we know that the girls in Mozambique have little to no relationship with supportive role models and consequently leave school or marry early to find a sense of security. Using an assets or resilience approach, we as social workers could provide meaningful relationships needed for the girls to flourish. Schwant and Underwood, 2013, page 1178. By adopting this approach, if all else fails, we will not be seen to be intruding or rescuing the community and enforcing the West helping the rest mentality. Just by being present and engaged, we will be encouraging the girls to measure the risks and navigate the challenges in their lives. Schwant and Underwood, 2013, page 1178. Additionally, our support and collaboration may empower the girls to have a stronger voice in their community, as well as to challenge patriarchal norms. And from here they can hopefully be closer to receiving the educational and equal opportunities of their male counterparts. To conclude, by undertaking a resiliency approach, we would not be driving the change. Instead, we would be guiding the girls in Mozambique to drive their own change, fostering new relationships and communication that places values on the lives of the girls in Mozambique as active members of their community. We have chosen to use the community organising approach as a social work intervention when supporting the work we do in Mozambique. We know that the current situation in Mozambique is complex and multi-layered. There are a long list of factors of why girls are unable to stay in education and as each year passes are more likely to drop out. So why use the community organising approach? Well, as Saul Alinsky once said, one should never do things for people that they can do for themselves. Community organising brings together mostly low and moderate income people through organisations or collective structures to promote social justice and the common good. And this is done by developing their individual and collective capacities to exercise voice in socio-political processes. Piles, 2009. Using the community organising approach allows for community empowerment and capacity building through collaboration. Community organising, Piles 2009, claims, works towards the liberation of oppressed and marginalised individuals and the transformation of social systems that perpetuate that oppression. Piles then goes on to comment, women in particular tend to be service providers, the caretakers for communities in crisis, the ones who are forced to pick up the pieces of a society that too often ignores its basic social welfare infrastructure. We know this to be true for the current situation in Mozambique. Girls take on the main caretaker role at home, along with current gender roles such as early marriage and basic human rights and needs not being met are all contributing factors for the girls exiting school early in their communities. The current education outcomes for girls are extremely poor, with 58% of females in Mozambique reported to be illiterate. as reported by UNESCO in 2018. So how can we begin to shift this using the community organising approach? Well, it begins with listening, and from here we can hopefully build strong relationships with local people who, through empowerment, can begin to create change in their community. And as Loretta Piles describes it, these first steps should have organisers meeting people where they are. They don't necessarily want to leave them there, but they have to accept people where they are, at least for the most part, and not be terribly judgmental. Piles 2009. She goes on to state that whether organising an individual in a one-on-one situation or building the strength of a group of constituents, relationship is central. Building relationship entails finding a common ground between human beings. Piles goes on to write about the act of sharing a meal to help establish common ground between us as human beings. This is a simple but very honest way to begin creating connections with the community. The joy of sharing a meal and exchanging stories can help break down barriers and also to dissolve possible power imbalances where the community might view us as a potential threat or even an enemy. Hiley 2008 further backs this concept with the statement, "The more important dimension of exchange is mutuality. Indeed, true exchange requires mutuality." According to these theories of exchange, exchange only exists when all partners benefit from a relationship or transaction. We can begin this process in Mozambique by sitting with a wide range of people in the community and listening to their stories. And where appropriate, even sharing our own. This list of people should include students, both past and present, their families, teachers, community leaders, healthcare workers, local community champions, and even religious leaders. We want to hear about their history, their culture, and both their struggles and successes. We want to understand what things they are doing well and how their community has achieved other goals that it has set for itself in the past. What are some of their local resources, the skills and knowledge that they already have available to them? All of this information will be helpful in how we collaborate when we take on the action stage of community organising. From the listening stage, we can naturally build relationships and look at what the community is asking for in the way of change. This is called the challenges process. Being respectful and empathetic while meeting with the community will help to serve as a backbone for the work we go on to do together. Allowing the community to speak openly and naming their challenges and the problems they see as a priority, as well as collaborating with them to find local solutions for local problems and to help empower and advocate for systemic change on a higher level, are both fundamental parts of the community organising model. Here we can offer support, skills and knowledge if they are requesting them. We also need to be mindful not to force our Western ideas and ideology if it is not being invited. We are not the holders of all that is truth. Our action stage should always incorporate genuine collaboration and respect for the people we are working with, even if our ideas or ways of thinking differ. We can ignite the action phase by showing passion and finding community champions that really believe in the work that is being done. If we have built those strong relationships and we have actively listened to the community, as Piles 2009 writes, this phase becomes all the more powerful, showcasing an incredible ripple effect as others join the movement. Ernesto Sorelli in 2013 speaks about working with the community and being prepared to adjust and change plans and ideas and to work on relationships with local people who are passionate and always be prepared to adapt to their desires and ideas as needed. We know plans are important, but as we also know, they rarely go to plan. Thinking about this in the context of getting girls to stay in school in Mozambique, where we can empower and support the community to advocate on their own behalf for real change, we can then begin to break down systemic oppression and government barriers and laws that are preventing basic human rights and needs from being available to the women and girls in these communities. We know the issue is complex and it will take decades of work, but it requires many people from all aspects of the community to work together to create change. Our reflection and celebration stages show how important as social workers it is to be regularly reflecting and celebrating the successes. These aspects of the community organising approach assure we remain accountable, transparent and regularly reviewing the work we are doing to ensure it's honest, respectful and for the right reasons. Finishing up, I would like to leave you with a quote from a mentor who I worked with in my first local council community development role. She once said to me, "You should always be trying to work yourself out of a job." In the moment it sounded crazy. Why would I want to work myself out of a job? I just got the job and I planned to keep it. But as I grew and developed in this position, I began to truly understand what she meant by that statement. And I think this sums up the work we should plan to do in Mozambique perfectly. Because when we can move towards empowerment over intervention, collaboration over manipulation, and shifting of the power balance towards citizen control means that we are here for the right reasons and hopefully can be a little closer towards working ourselves out of a job.